dedicate Front Entry and Commons Lawn to the Snyder family. 2 years ago, I presented to the board a measure or action item to honor the family, particularly Richard Snyder, because he's done so much for us. And they said, oh, but he comes from a long tradition of service to the community. And so they asked me to expand it for all of the Snyder family. And I'm very happy to do that. But I only knew Richard, so I am going to speak about Richard today. Especially to the students in the audience, I want to give this message because we don't always pay attention to the people in our community that can stand as role models for our kids. And we need to tell those stories. I think that kind of learning might be even more important than deriving the quadratic formula, to be able to tell the story of Richard Snyder and to offer him as a great role model for our students. In fact, Richard probably wouldn't be real thrilled with me today because he was a very humble man, and the generosity that he gave wasn't about him. It wasn't about having a commons named after him. He's probably pretty embarrassed up there right now, but you're going to have to bear with us, Richard, because we're doing this anyway. But those of us who were touched by his life were very fortunate. Richard gave so much to this district without even being asked. He would show up and tell me something needed to be done and then do it. He never asked for any kind of compensation for that. It was just because he wanted to help out and probably wanted something to do. And I was sometimes worried, well, what about Lois? What about your house? Shouldn't you be doing things? Oh, I got that done at 7 a.m. So I'll tell you, one of the stories that I told at his memorial, my very first day in the district 8 years ago was my 49th birthday. It was July 1st, 2004. And there were a couple of guys out back doing all kinds of excavation work for the new boiler building. And I was introduced to Richard Snyder and Tang Smith, and I assumed that they were subcontractors. And then I found out they were doing all of that just to help out. And that continued on until we lost him. Another story was, he took me out. I was really grateful because I'm not a director of facilities, but I inherited that as being a superintendent of a very small district. So he took me out back and showed me where the pipeline from the river pump was leaking all down the football drive. And he said, we need to find out what's going on down there. And I said, yeah, we do. So he trenched it out and then came and got me and he says, I have something to show you. And so I went out there and we're looking at this kind of small pipe leaking everywhere. And I said, what am I looking at? He's saying, you're looking at electrical conduit that was put down as a water pipe, and that's just not going to work. So I said, what are we going to do? I'm thinking, how much money is this? And he said, you buy me some plumbing pipe and I'll lay it for you. That's the kind of man he was. And if any of you kids could be like that, you too will have lived a great life, a life well lived. It was about community service with no return. And there are some people who give a lot of money to a place and expect this kind of naming. Not Richard. It was giving just to give. And he would not have thought that was a big deal at all. He would just think, this is the way I am, this is the way I'm supposed to be. This is what my family did. This is what everyone should be and do. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for me to have part of our campus named after such a great role model for the kids. And I want you kids to be able to see this every time you come to school, every time you come out to the picnic tables under the shed, and remember that this was named after a great man and a great family. I'll turn it over now to Rick Snyder, who is Richard's son, and Lois. We have Lois here, Richard's wife, and Diane, and Deborah, his two daughters, and namesake, Rick Snyder. Go ahead.
Well, on behalf of the Snyder family, I want to thank all of you for coming out today. And I'm competing with the fire and rescue. Let them pass. Snyder family has been around in Days Creek for about 115 years. My great-grandfather, Joe Snyder, was from Atchison, Kansas, and as near as we can tell, he just moved out here sight unseen and took the train to Riddle and rented a horse and rode up the river and established a place here in 1896. He eventually settled with his family in what's now Troy Michael's ranch, and he raised a bunch of kids there. My grandfather Fritz among them. From what I can tell, my great-grandfather Joe was on the school board here in around the 20s and the 30s, and my grandpa Fritz was also on the school board and a school board president. In 1958, the student body, you kids, you people who were in 58, dedicated the Days Creek yearbook to my grandpa Fritz Snyder. It was the last year of his life. And so he was known in this community. My parents retired out here at the place that my grandpa Fritz bought in, I think, 51, and my mom is still out there today, Woods Creek Road, and Deborah lives there as well with her husband Bob Gaddis. And I'm out here a lot, actually, in the summers on vacation, and so I have a special place in my heart in Days Creek for sure. I want to tell you that my dad was really a very unique person, incredibly humble. We didn't know, I think my mom knew, but I don't think we quite understood that he volunteered as much as he did, because he never talked about it. He just wouldn't. Lots and lots of hours. He had a backhoe, and he loved that thing, and he was really, really good at it. And so I think it was just a thing in his heart to give back to his community. He graduated from Days Creek High School in 48. See a plaque here. My mom graduated in 51. My sister Deborah actually went to first grade here. When I was born, and we lived in the White House right over here, I think you can almost see it, up by the Roadrunner Cafe, and that was the first year of my life I lived there. And so, again, we've been around here for a while. And I want to just tell you that my dad, we didn't know the extent of his volunteer work. In the last few weeks of his life, he had an accident out on the place, and it was a long goodbye, 3 weeks, and it finally took his life. We really kind of found out afterward that he had done this work here. I didn't know he did that field, and he leveled out this field and all the other things that Lori mentioned. I didn't know, because again, he just would not have said, hey, today I volunteered 8 hours. And so when I found out about it, and here's what I learned, is that each day I think the school provided him lunch, and they bought him diesel. Is that the arrangement?
Sometimes not even the lunch.
Yeah, okay, a cup of coffee, I don't know. So I appreciate your words, Lori, so much, that he led a life of volunteer work that we could all kind of emulate. And so again, on behalf of the Snyder family, I want to say thank you. This is a tremendous honor for us to have the Days Creek Commons area named after our family. Thank you very much.